to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
Didn't Dr. Phil, have you heard about this? Dr. Phil's
I've heard of him,
taking crap because he went on Rogan and some other people recently and was just blasting the government for their how they handled COVID. And one of the things he said he went on The View. One of the things he said on The View was which is, I don't know why'd you do that, but he was like the worst handling of COVID was how he handled the kids in school. Because he was like, they were the least vulnerable. And we wrecked them as a generation for the sake of maybe saving a few. And he was like, they were the least vulnerable. And then Whoopi Goldberg's like, wow, maybe we like, nobody wanted to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
So even someone like Dr. Phil is coming out and saying that. So our food has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Did you see that they officially ranked COVID to be treated along the same lines as the flu?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And then Fauci also admitted unknowingly that, the vaccines cause myocarditis in some young men.
Dude, what a mess.
I know when I die, that's why.
Yeah. It's so crazy. I know.
No, he said young men.
Oh, okay. Good.
It's so crazy. So we're 4 years past COVID now, and we're just still just in a...
Not technically.
No, 4 years since it started.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, 4 years since it started. So
since the
world,
shutdown started.
Yeah, the world was rocked 4 years ago or whatever. And it's just, and I know that 4 years ago we were like, oh, I can't wait for like a post-COVID world. We were, the whole government was like 2 weeks. And then anyway, but all that stuff, it's so interesting to me that 4 years sounds like such a long time. And it is, but it's still, I just remember those conversations we had back in 2020 of all these things beginning to happen. And now, some of them have come full circle to be like, oh, cool. Now they're just admitting everything. Yeah. It's such, what a mess.
It was a mess. I was like kind of pissy through the beginning of it too. Shut the parks down. Like,
I remember that.
Tell me I can't go out.
I'm going to the park. Yeah, that's so weird.
And I did.
We can only have organizations outside, but don't go outside.
Don't go in the sun where you might have like more vitamin D intake and can fight COVID better.
I just wish people would have been like, man, we have no idea what we're doing. Like, this is wild. Here's some suggestions to, hey, don't get sick. Don't touch a lot of old people. Yeah. Maybe don't poke your eyes all day.
Hey, if you go outside and you're not close to anybody, you're good.
You're good. You're fine.
And you're probably going to be healthier.
But
no, hey, go like lock yourself in your house and get sick.
And get sicker. Not only also the amount, anyway, I could keep going on that as well. I'll just go to the PCC instead.
That's a good idea.
There we go. Come on over to Pierce's Culture Corner, everybody. I'm not talking about COVID over here. I'm talking about snakes.
Love it.
So I saw on Twitter, and it's usually on Twitter or X. I saw on X something posted, and usually it's like slightly exaggerated, if not fully exaggerated of something. And so it was this video of this man swimming at the bottom of a river, going alongside a snake.
Oh, the Amazon, the biggest anaconda they've ever found.
Yeah. So that wasn't the biggest one they've ever found. But that's like the headline that's going around. So I was like, well, what's going on here? But it's due to them. They were down there trying to figure out the ecological effects of, there was another oil spill. There were some other things going on. So the way that they track some of how is the ecosystem doing down there, one of the things they do is they actually follow anacondas, and they follow the snakes of the area, as well as a few other species. But that's one of the reasons why they were trying to search out anacondas, see how they're doing. Especially, I would assume, I didn't see this in the articles, but I'm assuming you can know basically how they're doing off of their diet and also their size, if they're eating well, if they're malnourished, and also the fact that these snakes have grown so long, it means they've been there for a long time. Yeah. And so the what they had said was that was the largest one they had found, was that one individually. That one that they had found was 21 feet, which was huge. So 20.7 feet.
I'm assuming J-Lo wasn't the one down there swimming with them, right?
Who?
J-Lo?
No.
Did you see that movie?
No. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I need to go watch it, man. I remember telling my mom, because that came out when I was like 7. I was like, there's not a chance I'm going to see this movie. I was so scared of the commercials. I was like, there's no way. I need to watch it now, though. So while they were down there, they recorded one that was 20.7 feet long. They had talked to locals who had said there was one that was about 25 feet long, but they didn't have that one recorded. The longest one recorded, I didn't write that one down on here, but it was 27 feet. So I think that's where they got it. But that wasn't that specific one they had found. Got it. So longest one that they've ever recorded.
That video was cool. Of them,
I know.
See him down there swimming with the anaconda.
So sick. And he wasn't,
really cool.
The anaconda wasn't aggressive or anything. It was just kind of chilling next to them. It was very cool.
That anaconda has not seen the movie.
No, exactly.
He does not know how he's supposed to act.
Exactly. So they I don't know if it was that one specifically they had found at the bottom of the Amazon, but they had mentioned that they found a snake that was
I totally thought you were going to talk about the guy that wore the snake crush suit and allowed himself to be crushed by an anaconda.
Oh no, I didn't see
Did
that.
he die?
I haven't watched the whole video. No, he didn't.
Is that what you're watching?
That can be
right
next
now?
week for a
I'm
follow
watching
up.
the swimming one.
That's not the same one. I don't think that I saw, but it's cool.
Yeah. All right, carry on.
Yeah. So they had found a different snake that was, by all appearances, looked exactly like the southern green anaconda, which was already the largest in the world, or the species of green anaconda is the largest in the world. And they didn't know there's another like branch to that, which is now what they call the northern green anaconda. And they said, what's crazy about it, which okay, this is what they were doing. Okay. I remember now. They were taking like blood samples from different snakes to also get the feel of how are these outside things like oil spills and things like that, climate change, how is that affecting kind of the area? That's what they had said in the article. So like, so how are these different things affecting the snakes? And they had noticed that this snake had a 5% genetic difference than this snake. And they just thought they were both southern green anacondas. So they found a new species by doing these DNA, these blood tests and stuff like that. And they said, to put it in perspective, humans only have a 2% genetic difference between us and chimpanzees. And so they said that's a substantial genetic difference between these two snakes who we look different from chimpanzees, but these two snakes look exactly the same, behave supposedly like they thought 100% these are both southern green anacondas. But now they have a new species, which the reason why I put it on here, my PCC, is like to encourage, well, first of all, I'm just astounded that like of God's creation, like of the fact that like we're continually seeing like things that can proclaim the glory of God and his goodness and his intricacies in creation and like how he has set the earth to be. It's just super cool. Like just looking at it from a Christian perspective. And then also like when I was growing up, I don't know, nobody told me this, but I remember thinking like, well, we're in the 90s now. We're in the 2000s. Like I'm reading these history books. I'm reading about people like drawing maps and discovering America and like establishing the government here. And like all that happened back then. Like we've done everything we can do. Like we might have technological advances and things like that. But like as far as the world is concerned, outside of the ocean floor or space, like we've discovered it all. And here we are at a river in the Amazon that they're discovering new species at.
The same river they've been studying
forever, right?
Yeah, the Amazon's
and they're still
amazing.
Exactly, right? And they're still discovering new things. They're still figuring out how it works and all these things, which is awesome. And so like I'm excited as a parent to be able to like encourage that curiosity like with my kids as well. I don't know if they'll get into like a biological type field or anything, but just understand that there's so much more to learn and grow into. There's a buddy of mine that I wanted to know so badly what he did. And I read like 3 articles and I couldn't tell you one. All I know is mammal genomes. That's what he discovered something new about the mammal genomes. I went to school with him. We both graduated in 2008 from Central. He went to Tech and he was a part of a team that went down to South America. They discovered something new about the mammal genomes that has shaped how that entire field of study is now directed,
cool.
which is nuts, right? So like people from my own generation are discovering new things that are bending and shaping science. So like, I'm excited for just continue to learn more, I guess, like, and how like there are things like this guy went for a swim, supposedly, like he was just following snakes around and they discovered something new that has shaped and changed how they view a certain area of the world.
That's the most frightening thing I can think you say. I'm just going to go for a swim. There's a bunch of anacondas down there.
Yeah. I'm just swimming, just having a good time. What's funny about that video too, is he's like wearing shoes and a button down. So like, I wonder what it was for him to be like, just jump in the river and not like prep for it or wear a swimsuit.
It's not this video then.
Gotcha.
I would rather swim with an anaconda than a crocodile.
That is very true, dude. Did y'all see that video that going around of that old man who was able to get his arm away?
That's a gator.
Okay. That was crazy. Oh,
that's a little gator.
It's a little gator, right? Who cares?
My dog would have eaten that gator.
Yeah. What's the difference? So is there like a violence difference between alligator and a crocodile?
Yeah,
gotcha.
Drastically. So
gotcha.
Seems like caiman and crocodiles are a lot more aggressive towards people. Gators are really seemingly only aggressive when you're in their space.
Oh, okay.
But like, especially saltwater crocodiles, those suckers will just like get you at any time.
Yeah. We'll jump right into it.
Chilling on the beach, and saltwater crocodile comes up on the beach.
Did you see that video of that crocodile get demolished or destroyed by that family of hippos?
No.
So it went in after a baby hippo, and the whole like tribe just obliterated this.
Let me add to my statement. I would rather swim with crocodiles than hippos.
I know, right? Which are like the number one killers.
Situation's good.
The number one killers of people like in the whole world.
Yeah.
Like it seems like a hippo just sees a human like, yep, time to eat that thing. Like it's so crazy to me.
I think sugar isn't sugar the number one killer?
That's true. Yeah, go back to diet. Yeah.
There's a show called Something Bit Me, and it's
Charlie that.
Some of it's like anticlimactic, and you're like, nothing bit you. A moose kicked you in the head, But one of them is a hippo attack on some kayakers.
And, that's freaky.
And
it is, man.
So this guy talks about how he got drug underneath, like he's the survivor, but the other guy that was in the boat with him never came back up.
Oh man!
And the tusk of the hippo went through his thigh.
Oof.
And like he's bleeding out. I mean, he survived. He's telling the story, but golly, just mangled him. Just held him on the bottom. Just mangled him.
I'd like to see a hippo and an orca go at it.
Yeah.
So we need Horka. That can be a hippo orca movie, and then we need Crococonda.
Okay.
Okay. The winners of either one go to the next one, the finale.
No, because they crossbreed, and it's
we go.
Yeah, it's Horko. It's a hippo orca.
And that's going to be the next villain in the Kong.
You're about to pull a Pierce where you like say something trying to make up words that you really don't want to say.
A Crococonda.
See, it's getting close.
Anyway, Micah, what are we talking about today, man?
Today I want to talk about a kingdom perspective of money and finances, just kind of shaping, similar to last week, shaping the perspective of money and finances to a more kingdom mindset rather than just like here and now.
Wow. That's crazy just how clear you are, man. I'm excited about that direction. Let's do this, dude.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks for not asking me dumb questions.
Oh, man, absolutely.
Really
when you're that clear, I don't have to,
That's kind of what I figured. But
exactly.
There's Ryan right there. Man. My bad. Sorry. He's sitting right there. My bad. I think, so here's my thought behind this. There's obviously, when we start talking about finances, everybody immediately jumps in our world. Like we're going to talk about Dave Ramsey stuff. And I actually really enjoy, I think, a lot of the principles Dave Ramsey has and his whole perspective on
I love your change on him.
with finances. I mean, obviously he would not like some of the things I've done.
No.
But it's the overall perspective. But I think that's not where I want to go. I don't want to talk today about the wisdom of like how to deal with finances on a practical level. I mean, we might like get into that a little bit, but what I'd like to talk about is shifting the perspective of how we look at money and finances instead of looking at it as like, what's the best for me now, saying at the core, before that even comes into the conversation, my perspective of money and finances is this is a tool that I'm using for the kingdom, which I think is a biblical model, a biblical perspective. And I think that that's not typically what happens. Usually, I mean, Ryan, when you're doing marriage counseling with people and you're talking through finances, they're already in a situation where their perspective is probably off overall on Jesus being core, right? So when you shape their perspective back to marriage is about Jesus, included in that is your finances, right? And so sometimes I think we think about finances as like this separate thing. Like we have this kingdom gospel mindset, and what's not included in that is money. And so I think there's a shift that needs to happen probably for all of us to some degree. Maybe it's a smaller shift for some than others, of like thinking about money in terms of what's the best for the overall kingdom of Jesus rather than what's the overall best for me. And by no means am I mean, I think we've said this over and over again, probably in the podcast, but we are not people who say here at Simpler, or even at the 456 as pastors, who say like, we shouldn't have things. We're not saying like, don't have a house, don't have cars to drive, don't have, all right, I've been on this, I'm just going to be transparent for a moment. My heels have not really stopped hurting since my 40s. They hurt less all the time, but they've hurt less all the time because I started buying expensive shoes. So like practically, could I just buy $30 cheap shoes and make it? Yeah, but it would hurt nonstop. So like, do I like spending $150, $170 on shoes? No, but
I'm about to get those really thick-soled ones with the Velcro. For my feet.
The SAS thing.
SAS,
We're going to get you some of those compression socks too.
Senior assisted shoes.
Love it, dude. I used to think it was San Antonio shoes. I
was like told that when I was a kid.
What is it?
I don't know. I have no idea. I just made up senior assisted shoes.
I have no idea what they are either.
Yeah. I'm very quick with humor.
Anyway, so we're not people who say like you can't have things, but I think what changes is I hope will change for people is a perspective of what money's about. So like I think a lot of times when you end up, Brian, talking to people, or I do, talking to people about budget and finances, it's on a very practical level. Like, how can we improve your situation now? How can you stop spending money you don't have? Or how can we help you think differently and practically about money? Which is an important conversation to have, but I think San Antonio shoemakers, it really is interesting. So man, San Antonio people have like revolutionized feet for Ryan
for
and all
old
the
people
other,
forever.
So, but changing the perspective from just like practical to kingdom. So here's why I think it's important. The stat I've heard recently is that the number one form of currency right now is debt. I don't want to get in the conversation of why that's the case, but someone was arguing with me about that recently. Well, it can't be a currency. And I'm like, it kind of is a currency. It's how the Federal Reserve does banks. And side note, I just saw today that on Twitter, I don't know if this is true, that the Federal Reserve lowered the what banks are allowed to loan to. There's no limit on it. So like used to, they could only loan out a certain percentage of what they had in deposits. I think they just lowered that. So like, it doesn't matter what deposits you have, you can get loans, which is the crashing of our financial system in essence, probably. So anyways, the number one currency is debt, which means that the majority of people, at least in this part of the world, are in debt. And so what I think happens a lot of times is people, including people who are doing Dave Ramsey, their number one goal in approaching finances is how do I get out of debt? Which I don't think is wrong. I think is great from a practical level. But what if you shifted? And that was a secondary conversation. And the first conversation is, how do I utilize money and finances for the kingdom of Jesus? And that's kind of really where I want to like push the conversation. Yeah. Do you have some texts that you could like
so
bring up?
A couple of things, because like what you were just getting to there at the end was, it is really difficult for us to be gospel-minded with our money when we owe all of our money to everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we're in debt, I've heard somebody else say it this way, and maybe Dave Ramsey, I don't know, but it's not your money if you're in debt. No. And so you can't honor Jesus with your money if you don't, if it's not your money.
Yeah, there are caveats to that in terms of like being creative within the
business
financial system.
and different things. Sure. Yeah. But
because technically
bad debt.
Like, that's a good way to say it. Because technically when I swipe my credit card, it's debt.
Yeah. There's
even if I have the money in my bank to pay for it.
Yeah. So there's careless debt, bad debt, and then there's wise debt. So my boys are about to go
Dave Ramsey would disagree with you on that, but that, again, that's the stuff I don't really think we like have to get into the weeds on. Right. But the point is there that like if you're so worried about debt because you owe someone else, it's not really you're not free to kind of do what you need to do.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts on this. Like one of the things in Luke 12, Jesus tells the parable of the man who had produced so much crops that his barns couldn't contain it all, so he built bigger barns. And it's a parable that Jesus is telling, and he says, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And he says, even when a man is wealthy, his life doesn't consist in his possessions. Like, I think that has to be one of our attitudes as Christians, is that our life does not consist of our possessions, what we have.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, when they think about the blessing of God, they tend to think about their possessions rather than the spiritual. And I think that if we can think rightly about what it means to be blessed in God, and we can depart from the financial, it makes it a lot easier to be free with our money. Yeah. Because we're not thinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think that people will describe that a lot. Well, God's really blessed us.
Yeah, we've got a house, we've got cars, this stuff, whatever.
Which is funny because that perspective means that if you don't have those things, you feel like God has not blessed you.
Exactly.
Right? And also because none of those things enter into the kingdom of heaven with you, and we're perfectly blessed in the presence of God, then you're adding up the wrong things.
Yes. Yeah.
So the other things that come to mind for me are like in Acts 4 and 5, where all of the believers are sharing all things in common, meeting each other's needs. We see the longest stretch in the New Testament about giving is 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. And Paul talks there about the relief of the saints, serving the saints and providing for the saints. And he uses the picture of manna to describe that. So he talks about when people gathered manna, he quotes one verse from Exodus 16, but those who gathered much didn't have too much, those who gathered little didn't have too little. And the idea, because he's comparing our money and our giving of money to the collecting and usage of manna. And so he said that the people who gathered manna, because it was only good for that day, it wasn't good for the next day, it would be rotten. And so if you gathered too much, you would give your surplus to the people who didn't have enough that day, trusting God for the next day, because it wasn't going to last till tomorrow anyway. And those who had much were able to give to those who had too little, and those who had too little were blessed by those who had much. And if we would think of our finances that way, like I have enough to take care of what I need to take care of right now. And look, I'll be honest with you, I occasionally think, and this is out there, I know, this is just a thought that rolls around in my head sometimes. I don't think it's a biblical thing necessarily, but I occasionally wonder what Paul, writing 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, would think about retirement plans. And I'll say this, I think if our viewpoint is that our life consists of our retirement plans, then that's in violation of what Jesus is saying in Luke 12. If you're putting your confidence in your retirement plan, then there's a problem with that. I don't think having a retirement plan in our world economy and the way it works, I don't think that's a bad idea. But if that's your aim, rather than, hey, so, okay, I'll give you an example. We have a retired couple in our church who recently said, hey, we're excited about the new building. We know we need more space. We're going to talk to our finance guy and free up $100,000 this week to give you guys for the new building. And like, I can't free up $100,000 to put down on the new building, but but they did, because their mindset isn't guarding against their retirement. Their mindset is like, hey, we have this money right now. How can we use it today?
And to be clear, it was given out of their excess.
It was, which is the point of manna.
You could actually give $100,000 if you sold everything you had.
If I got rid of everything I had,
that's what I mean. So it's. I think that's what people miss in this is they think of like a socialist communist perspective, and that's not it at all.
Well, here's the other problem that people do is they think of the widow who gave her 2 cents, and most sermons on that text say give everything you have. Jesus doesn't ever say give like the widow gave. He never says that. It's not an instruction that he gives. He's not telling his disciples to do that. The Pharisees have just been giving a whole lot. They've been giving a large amount of money, and people are impressed. They're sitting there watching people give their offerings, and what Jesus does is changes their mindset about generosity. And he says, well, this woman who gave 2 copper coins gave more than all of them, which in terms of amount is not true, but in terms of value is true, or in terms of value is not true, but in terms of like she gave everything. So it's the idea that like be generous, but to your point, Mike, and I think this is one that a lot of teachers on money miss, is it's not give until it hurts. It's give out of the abundance. If you have more than you need today, and you know somebody has a need, I always think of Proverbs. I want to say it's 3:27, but don't hold me to that. But it says, do not say to somebody, come back and I'll give it to you tomorrow, when you have it in your power to do it today. So like if you have the ability out of your surplus to meet the need of somebody around you today, don't tell them, well, let me hedge my bets. Let me wait until tomorrow.
I think that's okay. So all that in mind, like I think the problem with what you're saying about the retirement plan is that the fact that it's for you personally for retirement. So here's what I mean. I think investing and gaining wealth is awesome because it allows you an opportunity to be more generous in the kingdom. So this is what I mean. So like if your whole goal of retirement is that I'm gonna like invest so that I can live the rest of my life like I want to, I'm not gonna say it's wrong. I'm just gonna say it's probably a waste. If your mindset is, you know what, I don't really want to slave labor like I am, or like work really hard for the rest of my life. I'd like there to be a point in my life when I have enough money where I don't have to work real hard anymore to do other things. That's a whole different perspective than like I want to retire and it be about me. Because if your mindset
I'm not looking
is like
for a beach home, in Naples.
Right. So like my perspective is I want to be at a point where I don't want to have to work anymore, but the entire time you have a kingdom mindset. So whether I'm working hard at a job, making money, or whether I am not working hard at the job and have saved enough money to be able to do that, my mindset is still that out of my excess, I am working for the kingdom. And I think that's what people miss is like, if your entire goal is to be comfortable in this life, you're probably never going to be comfortable because your perspective is off. If your goal is not Jesus, if your goal is not the kingdom, then it doesn't matter how much or how little you have, you'll probably feel the same. I know some rich people that are miserable, and I know some poor people that are miserable. And so I did see, as a little caveat to that, someone post one time that says, all the people who say money doesn't bring happiness, he goes, they've never had a lot of money. So from a cultural perspective, I think there's some scientific evidence that shows like there's a dopamine kicks when you buy things.
Sure.
Dopamine kicks when you like make a bunch of money. Like, so there are
when you don't have to worry about if you can, what bill to pay this month.
Yeah. There's some instant gratification and contentment. I heard something recently, someone say that they'd seen a study that said like in the US, the anxiety rate of people who make $80,000 and more is a lot less than people who make less than $80,000 a year. So there is something to what you're saying about that. But like, I think point being, whether you're poor or rich, if the goal's not the kingdom, if the goal's not the glory of Jesus, you're not ever going to be content. So the shift of perspective, I don't think is how much you make. I think the shift of perspective is, how can I be the most benefit for the kingdom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which again, we're not saying don't invest. All three of us have investments. And
you're probably not being very wise if you're not investing.
Agree.
Yeah.
So that's the next level, I think, of the conversation of like the practical ways to be smarter with the money you have, or gaining, or more ways to gain money, but not with the end goal of gaining more. With the, it's not even an end goal, with the goal of being part of the work that's going on in the kingdom of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like it's the question of, do you want to be on the bench or do you want to be in the game? Yeah. And I don't think being in the game means you have to have a lot. I think being in the game is a perspective of, what I have is I'm willing to use whatever I have for the glory of Jesus, for the glory of the kingdom. Yeah. We've said it before, like to college students, if you think you're going to be more generous later when you have more money, it's probably off. You'll probably be just as generous as you are now, even when you have more money. So it's not, and we're not talking about just like giving to the church. We're talking about just generosity in taking care of the saints, generosity in providing for needs of other people. The perspective shift is from trying to gain my own wealth to gain, if you will, like an opportunity to be more part of the kingdom. I mean, there's an example. Here's an example. Years ago, Ryan, someone told you back when you had no money, said, hey, your car's about done. I've got this business that's really successful. I'm going to buy you a new car, or another car, not a new car, but like I'm going to buy you another car. And they called you back and were like, well, wait, I got to take that money and invest it into this next business venture. And I promise it's going to make a lot of money. And if you'll just wait a little bit, once this business takes off, I'll get you a car. And I think maybe he did it one more time. And then that was it. Okay. He did that one time. And then within a year, he's bankrupt.
Like did what one time?
Like said like, wait one more time. I got to invest into another business.
So there were two things. It was, I'm going to support your ministry monthly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm going to buy you a car. And then after a few months, hey, I can't support you monthly right now because I'm going to take this money instead and do this other thing. And yeah, we'll make a lot more money. And then next year I'll start supporting you monthly again and buy you a new car. And then, it kept getting deferred.
Until he was bankrupt.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Michelle and I are like barely scraping by.
Yeah.
And I would be like, dude, just give me the $250 a month that you said you're like, just give me that.
Huge. Yeah.
You know, like I need that.
At that point, you're like, can you give me $50 a month?
Yeah, the promise of a car in a year and a half doesn't put food on my table.
This is actually, it's always brought this to mind when Paul is railing on the Corinthian church for their promise of relief for the saints in Jerusalem of these big amounts, and then they don't give it. They don't give what they said, and he's like, but the people in Macedonia who don't have a lot have given out of their poverty. To shame the church in Corinth for making these big promises they weren't going to keep. And so that's almost exactly what's going on here. That's not a kingdom mindset. A kingdom mindset is the Macedonians.
Yeah, the kingdom, his argument was, I'm going to have more money than I know what to do with in a year and a half, and then I'll take care of you, which
is not a kingdom mindset because it's a thought that like, once I get to this certain place, then I can be part of the work going on in the kingdom. Versus saying, I have not a whole lot right now. God, what can I do to be part of the work of the kingdom?
Well, I'll tell you,
the perspective shift.
I'll tell you this. My boys, we give them an allowance, not much more than I got by a shot, but
you got a shot for an allowance?
Yeah. They have to
Fireball
put,
or
with dad. they have to put 10% into what we call a kindness fund.
Uh-huh.
And I said, and then, like every now and then there will be something that comes up. And so recently, family in the church was having a tough time, and I had called our care team, and I had sent out a text to my Wednesday night Bible study. I said, let's put some money together to be a blessing to this family. And we put together like $1,300 for them. And then I told my boys, I said, I want you guys to see how much money you have in your kindness fund, and I want you to give it to the son, because he's in the youth group, and give it to him. And I want you guys to give it to him and just say, look, we just wanted to be a blessing to you. We know this has been really hard. Well, my boys had each had like $55 in their funds. And so they gave him $110, and they're like, here, do
That's
something.
awesome.
And for them to be able to understand that now,
Yes.
like what that means. And I didn't say, hey, let me add that to the check I'm writing them. I said, no, you just do it.
Yeah.
You give it to them, because I wanted them to experience that. I want them to think about, like, how do we help the people around us when we're able to help?
Yeah. It really is a heart shift, I think.
Well, and you used to do that. I don't know if you still do that, where you'd carry like $100 in a little part in your wallet.
I need to just do it again. I haven't in a long time, because
$100 is hard to come by. It's out of the surplus.
Yeah. So now that,
if anybody has $100 in their wallet and you're looking for, Micah could use $100.
Not now. I'm good. I'm good now. I did get second place at a disc golf tournament.
There you
recently.
go, man. Yeah.
Got some extra cash
Yeah,
for that.
congrats.
But I think the perspective shift is not a like, I don't think the practical stuff comes before the perspective shift. The perspective shift has to come first, and then the practical comes later. So like, if us three talk about finances and investing a lot.
Well, I'll tell you this, not to put too fine of a point on it. I mean, we're not destitute. My family and I are not destitute, but my family and I right now, every meal we eat at home, we're eating because somebody said, hey, look, I slaughtered a cow recently. Can we bring you some steaks and ground beef? And I'm like,
awesome.
yeah. And then somebody else called me and said, hey, I killed a deer this year. I've got some left over from in my freezer last year. Do you want it? And I'm like, yeah. So every meal we're eating right now, we're eating because somebody out of their excess supplied to my family's lack, and we have food. And it's not that we're destitute, but like, my goodness, that's a blessing.
Hey,
to
can
us.
I tell you something?
Yeah.
My family has a lack of ribeyes right now.
Okay.
I'm joking.
Micah's just putting that out there
joking.
for you.
I was talking to you. You have ribeyes. I don't have ribeyes.
If you have a surplus of ribeyes.
Joking. But yeah, I think the shift is, so if the perspective
Somebody
is first.
has a surplus of ribeyes coming your way, man.
If the perspective shift is first, that money and finances is a tool for kingdom work, kingdom ministry, then us three, like, we can talk about finances and money and the things we're investing in without it being the goal of creating another storehouse to put our extra crops in. The goal is, you know what, we're going to be wise with the tools God has given us to gain some wealth so that we can do kingdom work.
Paul warns the rich in 1 Timothy 6, but he doesn't warn them against being rich. He's earlier said in the chapter that the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. And so his warning to the rich believer, is don't be arrogant and don't set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us everything. And then to be good and to be rich in good works and be generous and be ready to share. And so, like, the idea is, even the rich weren't to put their confidence in their riches, but to have an attitude that God's the one who supplies. And I'm going to take what I have, the excess of what I have, and be generous to the people around me.
Yep. And a little side note on that, back to the beginning with the debt thing. It is incredibly difficult to be generous when you are constantly worried about paying back debt. So, like, that's what I like, the practical aspect of what Dave Ramsey does.
For sure.
Because he's helping people get free of that slavery, free of that, like, obligation to be under the weight of that. And honestly, I think that the reason, I guess, Pierce, you were in a little different camp, because your wife was sugar mama for a little while.
She was sugar mama.
Like, Ryan, you and I, we lived that, you know what I mean, for a long time, that provision. And so, like, it's a different perspective to, like, I don't know, have gone through that, you know what I mean? Like, to know what it is to trust God on a consistent basis, which is still a struggle, I think. But, I think that I think too often the conversation around money and finances either goes to practical, like what's the best way to handle money, which is an important conversation.
Yeah,
but I don't think
there's
before the perspective change. But then also I think it tends to rest in us. So like, and maybe I haven't done a good job of this, but like I've made some moves in the last couple of years that I'm hoping will like pay off in the next couple of years. And if it does, I don't think it really changes much about my life, except that I have more ways to be generous and more ways to be part of kingdom work. Like, I don't think it's funny to me how many people who doesn't matter what amount of money they make live month to month. What I mean is like, obviously there's certain situations where like it's very difficult to not live month to month unless you make more than a certain amount of money. But I know of people who make quite a bit of money who just spend their money on whatever, without the perspective of this is ultimately about the kingdom. Again, I am not trying to say don't go out to eat. I'm not trying to say don't have cars or houses. What I'm saying is it really is a perspective. It's a heart of kingdom rather than me.
Absolutely. It goes back to the last episode as well, of just like really sincerely the gospel being core. And so if the gospel is core for us and we understand who we are in Christ and who we're made to be, and part of who we are made to be is participants in the things of God and how he's working and how he's moving. And last episode, we talked about what that means in regards to sharing the gospel and relationships and things like that. And now also leaning into what does it look like for finances? Regardless of where you are, we can have the same mindset and the same mentality of knowing, man, I have an opportunity now. If I'm living off of $25,000 a year or $100,000 a year, $1 million a year, whatever that is, I still have an opportunity to be a part of what God is doing. And one of the things that I've been talking about with our young adults group as well is there's a lot of people talk about, I don't know the specific word for it, but like if I bring up, there's a guy that went to an interview. There's a story that he went to an interview, and the first question the guy asked was, how many yellow cars did you see on the way here?
How many yellow
cars did you see on the way here? And his first thought was like, I have no idea. I have no clue. Maybe one, maybe two. And then he's like, do you think, and he asked the audience that he's talking to, he's like, do you guys think that I noticed yellow cars all the way home that day? He was like, absolutely. My mind was already bent on that. And so one of the things that I encourage our young adults group to do recently is more of a generic sense of just pray for opportunities to take advantage of who we are in Christ. And so I think that the more that we pray about just psychologically, the more that our mind is opened up to it, let alone the Spirit working within us to encourage us and push us toward that. So I think same thing with finances and being a part of kingdom work is we have this beautiful opportunity. And I think too often what we do is we allow our filter and understanding of finances, which is everything you just said, Mike, of just like a misunderstanding of spending or just completely bent upon our own efforts, our own actions, to defining our finances. We look at this opportunity and we bring in all of our filters towards this opportunity, and we don't take advantage of it fully, I guess is the best way to say it, versus stripping those filters and saying, man, this opportunity of being a part of the kingdom, this should be my forefront in my mind. Sure, there's wisdom in all these other areas, but those are wisdoms that are taking action as I'm walking in this opportunity to partake in the kingdom. So we can be wise in how we invest. We can be wise in how we do things. There's a buddy of mine who in college, his whole perspective of giving and being a part of the kingdom was, man, every penny I had, it's like what we said earlier, every penny I have is for the gospel. And so he'd get his paycheck, it'd be gone by Sunday, because he would give as much as he could over the weekend. And then on Sunday, just drop the rest in the giving plate essentially. And then Monday he rolls around, he's got to pay bills, and he's maxing out credit cards and calling parents. Oh yeah. And doing a bunch of stuff where.
And that sounds really noble, because what he's saying is, oh, look, I give everything to God.
But it was, if on paper, that's very unwise. Like he put himself in the debt that you're talking about, that people will need the freedom from to be able to have this opportunity continued. So like he was digging himself in a hole while from his perspective being giving, but it's all from this misunderstanding of what this opportunity could be. And so it all has to stem from an understanding of who Christ is, what he's done, the gospel, the intention of kingdom work here and now.
Every example in the New Testament is people giving out of their excess. Every example, every single one.
And when we, I truly believe, because I shouldn't say it that way. I was about to say I believe this because I've experienced this. That's not why I believe it, but I have had the opportunity to experience this of like that that joy you have when you have that excess, whether or not that's $20, $1,000, what it looks like for that family of $100,000. Like that level of like being so stoked to use it for the kingdom, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
and I think that comes from that mentality and that foundation laid in who we are in Christ of just like Hannah and I remember like just at different points in our marriage, like looking at our finances and being like, oh, whoa, like we have the opportunity now to do this. We have the opportunity to give over here while being wise where we can for kids and for finances, for bills and all that stuff, being like, dude, yes, let's do this finally.
It's a heart of generosity. You know what's funny? I think, Ryan, it all comes down to what you said a second ago when Paul says the love of all money, or the love of money is the root of all evil. So like it's the love of money. And I don't know why that's such a big trap. Like, cause if you looked at money as a tool rather than an identity or something that gives you value, then you wouldn't be stuck in that. But for whatever reason, that seems to be the case where that's a tendency is we tend to love money. So if you love money, you're probably not going to be someone who has a perspective that this is ultimately about the kingdom and the glory of Jesus. If you don't love money, but instead you love Jesus, money comes as a tool and a venue for you to be part of the kingdom work. And I think that's the shift, is it's not the love of money, it's the love of Jesus.
Well, it's again, it goes to, you mentioned this, Pierce, it's like what we were talking about last time, but this idea of my perspective has to be that everything I'm doing, I'm seeking to honor Jesus. So like the car that I bought a few years ago, the Highlander, my wife doesn't particularly like it. It looks too much like a minivan or something to her. It's too whatever, you know.
Props to your wife for like using that as a reference.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts on it. One,
I'm just going to get a minivan.
I needed, I don't mind the minivan. I needed something that I could move a big painting in, where I had enough room to lay down all the seats and put a big painting in. And I couldn't do that in my car, and I could barely do that in her 4Runner with a big piece. The second thing was, as our boys were doing more and more athletics, we help shuttle, we take turns with other families, and I needed room for multiple people in my car. And so I bought the car with those two things in mind. So it helps me be effective in moving my art, but it also helps me be able to give my kids and their friends rides to or from events.
Would have been more effective to have automatic sliding doors on the side of your car.
Yeah, that would have been, it would have been way easier.
A little bit closer to the ground. You know?
But the point being, like, I'm thinking about, hey, I want to be able to serve my friends.
Your point is like, even when you purchased a car, there was like some kind of intention for kingdom. Now we will say this, like, I think people could go overboard on here to say that and say like, well,
don't make it a rule.
Like, so you're saying every car I have to do it with that perspective. No, that's not. I mean, Aiden's car is like the most impractical thing you could. It's a 94 Jeep Wrangler, the soft top. It's not safe. It's like, you know what I mean? But like, so I think you're not trying to make a rule out of this. What you're trying to say is my heart is for Jesus. When
Asher gets Michelle's car in a year, Michelle will not follow my model on that. And you know, she has a small car that she wants. It's a small SUV that she wants, and
does it have automatic sliding doors on the sides?
No, it doesn't. But it'll fit the four of us just fine. But it, and then we still have one car that if we need to pick up other people or whatever, we can. And so, and that's we don't have to have two of those cars,
right?
You know, but we needed one so that we could.
See, I actually think all that is the secondary conversation from the perspective shift, where you start talking about the wisdom and practical, because it can look different for different people. And
it will.
You know, so, but like if your perspective is, I don't have the love of money.
Yeah.
I have a love for Jesus, and money is a venue or tool that I'm using to like be part of the kingdom work.
Yeah.
Then I don't think you get stuck in the rut. Now you're not thinking, you can have a nice car without thinking about the every time the practicality. Because if we're being honest, if someone's like, well, I bought a more practical car, I bought a $30,000 minivan. Well, why didn't you buy a $15,000 used minivan?
Sure.
Well, you bought the $15,000 used minivan. Why didn't you buy a $5,000 old beater minivan? You know what I mean? You can just keep going, and that's not a worthwhile conversation.
The most generous people that I've ever known financially were some friends of ours out in Longview, and they were just really ridiculously wealthy. And I met him in August of 2006. Michelle and I had been engaged for a month, And I'm out there preaching a revival in Longview, and this guy takes me to lunch afterwards. His name was Terry. He died of cancer a number of years back, but he takes me to lunch. He goes, wanted to get to know you a little bit better. Really enjoyed, your preaching this morning. Wanted to give you and your fiance a wedding present. Congratulations. And so he gives me an envelope, and I call Michelle, and I'm like, hey, we got our first wedding gift. It's 4 months before our marriage and our wedding. And so
is that 2 weeks after you guys started dating?
About, yeah. And she goes, well, open it up. And it was a check for $5,000. He was just like, happy wedding,
So
right?
Yeah.
And so this guy had a 9,500 square foot home, like just massive. His upstairs was bigger than the first home Michelle and I lived in. Like it had a couple of bedrooms, bathroom, a little kitchen area, had like a theater room. Like his upstairs was bigger than the house that Michelle and I lived in first. And yet there was hardly ever a time that somebody wasn't living with him or he wasn't taking care of somebody. Every baptism service that the church ever had, they had at his house in his pool, and every event that was ever hosted, he paid for. And he just was like, man, I'm just going to do everything that I can do. And there was one ministry that he really, I'll tell you this. He called me. Michelle and I had been married for 7 months. He called me and he goes, hey, get your passport. You have a passport? I said, yeah. He goes, get it ready. Make sure you're up to date on it. He goes, in 3 months, I'm taking you and 4 other pastors I'm taking you to Indonesia, and we're going to spend 3 weeks there, and y'all are going to do some pastors conferences. He's not a teacher. He's not a preacher, but he was like, I'm flying the 5 of you guys over there. Well, I agreed to go. We fly over there. We were in 2 different places. He rented out the entire hotel for all the pastors to come from all over the island, and paid for all the food for the week for these 250 pastors on one island and then another 300 pastors on another island. Wow. When we're about to touch down, he comes and sits next to me, super sketchy on the plane. And he goes, here, open your shirt. And I'm like, what? He goes, open your shirt. And so I kind of open my shirt, and he goes, here, take this. And he hands me a saran wrapped brick of cash and says, put this in your pants, down your shirt, in your pants. I'm like, what? He goes, it's $25,000. He goes, I always get searched. And he goes, because you're not supposed to bring more than 10 grand in. And he goes, so break it up and put it into your pants. And he hands me a roll of saran wrap. And he goes, go to the bathroom and make it smaller packages and put it in your pants. So I smuggled 25 grand into Indonesia.
We gotta bleep this part out.
And he goes, and I said, what do you want me to do with this? I go to give it back to him after we land. And he goes, no. He goes, over the next 3 weeks, you just give it away to anybody you think needs it. And that's just how he was all the freaking time, all the time. But his attitude was, I'm going to work hard at my job. He owned his own company. He owned a roofing company. He was like, I'm going to be the best at my job, and I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to do everything I can for people to know Jesus. And he was never the voice. He was never the teacher. He was just going to facilitate everybody else that was.
So I think that's an important point that you're is implying, is that ultimately the perspective is that it's not really just money. No. If your perspective is, I want to be part of the kingdom
and
work.
You don't have to have a tiny house. You don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to be part of the kingdom work. Then what you do is you utilize the system or situation that you're in, whatever that is, for the kingdom work. He's asking you to go do kingdom work. He can't do what you're doing. You don't have the resources to do what he's doing. So when you combine those things together, that's when the kingdom work happens. So that's what I mean is if my perspective of money is it's just a tool, it's a cog in the whole wheel of the kingdom work, instead of thinking that my entire life is based on money, what happens is you're freed up to invest and make a lot of money and do kingdom work. You're freed up to, even if you don't have much, to say, in the little I have, I'm going to do kingdom work, even if it's not from the perspective of money or giving. Whatever it is, your mindset's kingdom. Then you're not stuck in this rut where you're just gaining wealth for yourself, or you're. I mean, honestly, I think if we're being honest, part of the majority. I was going to say this might be unfair, but it's probably not. The majority of people who are in a lot of debt is because they're selfish. Because they've made bad financial decisions, because they think they deserve a 75-inch TV, and they deserve to have a nicer car, and they deserve to have a cell phone plan that's way too expensive. You know what I'm saying? I'm picking, but I think part of the reason people are in such big debt is because they're selfish.
Well,
If your perspective was kingdom, then you would go, I'm not able to be part of the kingdom work very well right now because of debt. Someone's like, well, I got a bunch of student loans. Why'd you take out, I'm not saying you can't fix it. Like, you got to fix it, but like, why'd you take out those student loans in the first place?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a bad system.
Yeah.
Like, student loans is a bad system. And I'm not trying to make the people who have a whole bunch of student loan debt feel bad. You've got to fix it. You've got to figure it out and get out of that. What I'm saying is, like, the reason you got into that is because your perspective was, I'm going to do this, take out this loan with the intention of making money later. And now you're struggling through that. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole,
So that's the practical, obviously practical conversation. But backing up, I think that people need to hear that. As hard as that is to hear, as hard of a pill as that is to swallow, it is, from a money perspective, debt is something. Bad debt is something that keeps you from being as much part of kingdom work as you could be or should be.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a term, but this perspective we're talking about of being a perspective of being a part of kingdom work and using our finances to do so. There's a friend of mine I was talking to years ago. Whenever I first got brought onto staff at the 456, I raised money for a while. I sold some shirts. I asked for donations. I did those things. I was talking to a buddy of mine. And I was like, it's so far removed from me. And he didn't use the same language, but I was like, man, I feel bad because, like, I'm young. I can go get a job at Hastings again. I can go to Home Depot. I can go to these places.
That's my favorite.
And get a job, right? And so I was like, it feels weird. And I forget how he said it, but basically it was like,
Wait, what feels weird?
It feels weird asking for money. Like, it feels weird. Yeah.
I gotcha.
Basically being like, this is the opportunity I've been given. I need money to pay my bills and survive. Like, I felt weird because I was like, well, I could probably make it work. I could work like 80 hours a week or whatever. But like, I forget exactly how my friend said it, but he basically was like, man, how proud are you? Like, that you're going to only rely on like what you can do. He was like, he'd been in ministry for a few years longer than me. He was like, it's been crazy to see people who want to be involved with what God is doing, but they're not having these opportunities. They're not that person. They're not the preacher. They're not. It's exactly what you're saying about Terry. Like, and he said, and you're going to rob them of this opportunity to be a part of what God is doing. And he was like, so for me in that moment, I wasn't the one, like, I didn't have any extra money. Like, I literally was jobless. Like, I was asking people for money to be a part of that, be a part of the ministry that's going on. And I wasn't jobless. You know what I mean? Like, not a consistent income.
Yeah.
And so like, it was, that perspective shift was necessary for me as well to receive the gifts, if that makes sense. So I'm not looking at it as a perspective of, oh, you worked hard for your money. I better pay you back. I better do this. It's stripping away that our understanding of finances and money, that worldly understanding, and accepting an understanding of what you're saying, Micah, to continue the language, kingdom work understanding of acknowledging these are people who want to give towards kingdom work. They want to give towards what God is doing. And part of that is, and in both situations, neither one of them should be about pride, just about the gospel.
Yeah.
And so, like, I can receive this money for the sake of the gospel, and just like they can give that money for the sake of the gospel. Like, and it's crazy how freeing that can be just for the people of God, and how we work and interact with each other.
I think people want to have the practical conversation first before the perspective shift. And I think that's where it gets muddy.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, well, should you really raise money, Pierce?
Yeah.
You know, like, should you really buy that car? Should you really buy that? Like, you want to have the practical conversation first, but you can't until you deal with your heart. Is my heart set on Jesus? Is my mindset, I want to live my life for the glory of the kingdom of Jesus? When that becomes the core for you, then you can start having the conversations of the practical.
Sure.
All right, so like, let's just say, Ryan, you guys were in this situation. You got married and you guys had a whole bunch of debt.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of debt, right?
$55,000.
It's a whole bunch of debt.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're gauging by, like,
Not the
that's
most,
like
but it's
almost what I paid for my first house, like 10 grand. Anyway, so like, but your perspective was
Average debt, household debt this year is $104,000.
Wow.
Golly, that's just
Wait.
average.
Does that include mortgage loans?
Nope.
Isn't that crazy?
That does not include mortgage.
Nope.
That's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So that's like consumer debt.
Yep. Yeah, it's broken down. That's consumer debt, and then there's credit card debt.
Oh, that does not include. Oh my God.
And then
that's not including
there's
credit,
mortgage.
So that's more like just
I guess. Oh no, I can pull it back up.
plans, but yeah,
But it's
that's wild.
worse
it's
than
at least not home.
Yeah. Worse than I thought.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay.
So
I'm like literally shocked by that. You looked that up. Okay. let me regain this. So when you and Michelle got
grand.
married, you guys had 55 grand in debt. And what you realize, and you guys told me this early, is we realized this is not a situation that is going to be beneficial for us moving forward.
Nope.
So you worked very hard for a year or two,
year and a half,
which is impressive at your income level, to say we're going to do whatever we can to get rid of this, because your mindset was, we know this is hindering us and being part of the work we feel like God has called us to do. And so again, that the practical is
so
how
like Terry gave us $5 grand. Every bit of that went to the debt.
Sure.
Because
that's
so we didn't eat out very much. We made a conscious choice that we're going to get out of this as fast as we can so that we can get in a better spot.
Point being, all the things you just said, that's the practical conversation of how you get out of debt. The reason you can have those conversations is because you realize the perspective correctly, that this is about the kingdom. This is about the glory of Jesus. Not that you can't glorify Jesus with debt, but you realize that it's a hindrance. It's it's something that is keeping you from.
I cannot be free with this money.
Yeah. And so you guys worked very hard to get rid of that debt. And because of that, honestly, I forgot to say this. This is what I think allowed us, when we were like early in ministry, well, maybe even like more recently, up to like more recently, struggling, is the reason we were able to make it like that, as well as we did. And what I mean by as well as we did is, like, I don't think we were ever starving.
Right.
Our kids always had clothes. We had cars to drive. That we weren't like in like dire straits is because we didn't have bad debt. And so that's another example of like how important that is. That perspective shift that we both were lucky enough to have early on, that someone gave us the wisdom of. This is about the kingdom. This is not about you. This is not about the love of money. Because of that, we were able to not be strapped down by that stuff, and we're able to do the ministry we did for years. I think partly because we didn't have that kind of debt. We weren't spending more money than we were making. We weren't buying things we didn't need to buy. Again, that's practical. That's wisdom. But I think now that you've said that, average debt, like, that makes me think I need to be a little bit harsher about it. Like for real. Again, I am not trying to tell people how to spend their money. What I am saying is, I think if your heart is you and not the glory of the kingdom, you should consider that. I feel like that should inform the decisions you make financially. I've heard people tell me recently, like, man, they want to think more about how they spend their money. Which I think is phenomenal. Like,
it's awesome.
Being intentional, having the perspective of like kingdom with how I spend my money. I mean, gosh, like, I don't know if I should call him by name, but I'm going to. But like Matt Johnson in Florida, like, his whole heart is like, man, he's an entrepreneur. He's always going to do entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah, super creative guy.
But that's the thing he says constantly. He is the opposite of your friend who said, I'm going to put the money in the next business. Matt, I don't know if you guys knew this. When Matt Johnson was here, he was like sleeping on a mattress in an apartment. Like, that's how poor he was. And he would give us money.
It's wild.
And now that he has more money, it's the same heart, right? So you have guys like Matt Johnson who's seemingly, from the moment I met him, his perspective was, man, I want to be part of the kingdom work. I feel like this is God's made me good at entrepreneurship, and I'm going to make money, and I'm going to go strive to make money. So that I can. It wasn't like so Matt could have wealth. You know, and Matt's got some cool stuff now.
Well, we have a friend out of Houston area who supported your ministry and my ministry for over a decade, like 12 years. Because he was like, man, I believe in what you guys are doing, and I'm not doing what you guys are doing, and I want to support you guys. And he contacted us recently and said, hey, look, I think you guys are at a place now where I'm going to start supporting some other ministries. And we were both like, awesome. Thank you for what you did for us.
100%.
Like, because there were times that I was surviving because of his kindness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
And it enabled me to continue to do the ministry that God had put in front of me to do.
Let me give you one more thought. I think this should be something. I'm going to say this. I think it would be a good idea to make this, or maybe how you can be part, specifically you listening, how you can be part of kingdom ministry, a matter of prayer. and then see what God does. Like, see how your prayer for God's direction and wisdom and you being part of the kingdom work that's going on, what that looks like. I think for some people that might end up being a financial thing, and I think for some people it might be something else. But I think if that's your heart and prayer, like, God, I want to be part of what's going on in the ministry and the kingdom. How do I do that? What's the best way for me to do that? And then watch and see how God like starts taking your heart certain directions. We were in a awkward financial situation at the end of last year. I say awkward, like I didn't have a lot of events this last year. It was just a weird financial year. Like, just the nonprofit that I get part of my salary from, this is before like 456 gave us a raise, but like I just the ministry didn't have a lot of money. And so I didn't get a paycheck in December, and I knew I wasn't going to get a paycheck in January. And we were okay not getting a paycheck in December, but we were not going to be okay not getting a paycheck in January. I was going to have to find, Home Depot, here I come.
Yeah, that's right.
And you guys can't both go there. I've got to go there. Like,
sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, side note, if we're being honest, like, that makes more sense for me to work at Home Depot than it does you to work at Home Depot.
It doesn't matter. I've been saying I was going to work there since 2009.
Sure.
So.
I feel like you should switch it to Michael's or something like that. It makes more sense. Home Depot. So anyways, January rolls around and I'm like, all right, God, like, I need it. And no joke. So we pray about it. The next day, get a donation from a lady for $1,000.
Awesome.
And she said, I sent her a text and just said thanks. And she said, how did she say it? She said, I'm not saying that I only give when I get like a spurring on from God. She goes, but this one was evident, like super clear.
That's cool.
So like
specific answer to prayer.
Yeah. So she was praying and God, I don't know what that looks like, brought me to her mind, something, but like, watch what literally watch what happens when you begin to pray. God, how can I be part of the kingdom ministry? How can I use the tools I have? How can I use the finances I have, even if it's a little or if it's a lot, for the sake of the kingdom? And watch how God begins to shape your heart.
Yeah. Well, I'll still say that one of the nicest gifts, and I've been given some large financial gifts, but one of the nicest gifts I was ever given was from a second grade and fifth grade brother. And this is years ago. I mean, pre-Michelle, pre-moving to Angelo. This is like 23 years ago, something like that. And these two brothers walked into my office. I had a part-time office in this church that I went to. I wasn't on staff. And they came in and they gave me a $30 H-E-B gift card to help me buy groceries. And they had each saved their $5 allowance for 3 weeks. So they had each kicked in $15 to buy me this gift card. And the only reason they didn't wait another week because they were so excited to give it to me. And so they gave me a $30 H-E-B gift card to help me buy groceries. And it was just so stinking generous of these two little kids,
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. I just wonder, like, what are the other things we could really begin to do if our holistically perspective was, this is about the kingdom and not about me.
Yeah. Especially with something like finances, that from a worldly perspective, it's all about self. It's all about gain. It's all about.
Here's a check, I think. Just a thought. You guys can give me your last thought and you can guys give me your take on it. I think a good check would be if everything you have goes away, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like you're worthless? Do you feel like you're a failure? Or do you feel like, oh, that sucks, but I am who I am in Christ, and we're going to step forward and move forward with and build again, or something like. Do you feel like it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, or is it just a tool that got taken away?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant check. It's interesting because we've done that a couple of times, like Hannah and I, just throughout the years of job changes and things like that. And then like a couple of years, 3 years ago now, like just feeling like every penny was going towards things that were outside of our control and just not having any freedom and being like, well, we're not going to go in debt and take out loans for all these things, but we're draining every single thing we have and all the effort towards this. And so like being on a low end, being on a high end, and man, and I know we say this a whole bunch, but just the level of freedom for both of us to have that conversation. I know we had it specifically kind of coming out of the tail end of that, but also like more recently, like with the raise, you mentioned the raise of the church and some stuff like that, and just being like where are we? Where is our hearts? And just kind of walking through it and just realizing how abundantly grateful we are for this opportunity, for where we are now financially, for the things that we get to do now, like, and not have to worry so much about it. Like, but even in the midst of that, like that part of that questioning was like, but if it was stripped away, would we allow worry to change us?
Yep.
Would we allow anxiety to morph us? Would we allow, and for us both to just be like, man, no, like praise, like we've got a foundation that's not dependent upon wealth. That's not dependent upon finances. That's not going anywhere. So we could be stripped down to nothing. We could be built up to everything. Or like financially speaking, financially speaking, or built up in a tons of way. But in both those mindsets, it's the work of the Spirit, man. And it's so cool. It's so cool to realize, like, man, thank you, God, for that mentality, for that heartbeat to want to be a part of kingdom work, to not allow what the world dictates as a defining aspect of your household, or your personality, or your marriage, not allow that to be a definer, but allow Christ to be a definer, and then realize that all these things that we have now in this world can be utilized as tools, as a means to see His.
We don't take any
grow.
of those things with us.
Exactly. Yeah.
They stay here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they stay here. So let your worth rest in Jesus and not in your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll say this: use your stuff for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so I think I'll say this: I think if you're listening and you go, all right, my perspective is that I'd like to have the practical conversation now, let us know. Like, we love, all three of us love to have that conversation practically with people, like a kingdom mindset. What does that look like practically with what you have? What are some smart ways to use your money and utilize your money for the kingdom? And I'm not talking about just giving. I'm talking about like, well, I guess it ultimately ends up being giving. I'm just saying, like, how you can be smarter with your money with the intention of it being for the kingdom is what I'm saying. So we'd love to have that conversation with you too, if you want to have the practical. The goal of this episode was not to talk about the practical, but to talk about the heart shift, the perspective shift. But we're happy to have the conversation of practical with you.
If you could put that heart shift, that perspective shift into one sentence, a simpler view. I don't know if you said it at the beginning, but we can reiterate it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably something like a correct perspective of money is it's a tool for the kingdom.
Yeah. Dope. I like that. Correct perspective of money. It's a tool for the kingdom. You know who my favorite tool is? Steven. We're at the Garden Audio as always. Steven doesn't have a Garden Audio social media page, but him and his wife have a realty group called 87 Realty Group. Go give them a follow. And if you don't care about real estate, you don't have to give them a follow, but shoot them a message. Say, man, Steven, I love what you're doing over at Simpler. Steven is a vital part of what we do here as far as professionalism, as far as quality, as far as consistency is concerned. And so we'd love to be able to have him be a part of the Simpler team and the Simpler community. Give us a follow on social media at simplerpod. You'll see clips. You'll see things shared over there, all that fun stuff. Check out the show notes. We've got links to what Mike is doing. We got links to Simpler Bible, and there are also opportunities in both of these facets with Micah's ministry through being a part of Disc Golf Pro Tours and being a part of Eagles Wings, as well as with Simpler Bible. There are opportunities to help out financially there, and so if in light of this
Which
podcast
was not
episode,
the point of this episode.
it definitely was not. But in light of it, there are opportunities. And so not to urge you, not to push you, not to do anything, but there's donation pages for Simpler Bible as well as for Micah's ministry. And so those are linked down in the show notes. And if you're not able to or interested in to give financially, check both those things out. Give Micah a follow on social media. See what's going on. Give Eagles Wings a like on Facebook. See what's going on in the world of disc golf and how God is moving and impacting that community. Go give Simpler Bible a subscribe on YouTube. Follow along on Spotify. Be a part of it on social media and just see, learn. I'll forget the tagline again, but daily biblical growth. Experience daily biblical growth. There through Simpler Bible. And so you guys, I think, are 100 days in recording wise, not where we are currently, but yeah. So like, it's great to see you and Colin work together, work so fervently to pump out Simpler Bible, but then also just the response is super cool to see people experience the simplicity of enjoying and knowing God and who He is through His Word.
Yeah, we had recorded through episode 100 at the end of February. That's where we finished.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
We'll be through episode 140 by the end of this month.
I broke the illusion again, man. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Pierce.
I know. Man. I'm so sorry. But yeah, anyway, yeah. So all those things are tagged down below. Check out Simpler Bible. Check out Micah's stuff. You can follow us all of our personal pages and things like that. But But man, we can't say enough how much we appreciate the Simpler community. Being able to see how God is working and moving through the conversations that we're able to have here, that are recorded, as well as just in other places with friends and family and the 456 community that are stemming from conversations we're having here at Simpler or through Simpler Bible, all of these different things. It's awesome to see the Simpler community grow and grow and grow. And we are thankful for the Lord using it. It's awesome. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? We'll catch y'all in April. Bye.
Bye.